Hello fiction fiends, my name's Sonia and I write, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I already know what you're thinking. Sonia, what's going on with those alpha wolf ears you've got on? Well, I've got on my best alpha wolf-esque outfit because today I'm going to be discussing my most recent read on my TBR, Bride by Ali Hazelwood. ASMR. To forewarn you, this is not a classic review where I go through the events of the plot in chronological order. I'm just going to be discussing my likes, my interests, if you will. Things that caught my attention about this book, all the things I want to talk to you about and get your opinions on. So on my list of to-dos today, I'm going to be talking about the protagonist, Miss Misery Lark, the antagonist, Vamp Daddy. I can't remember his name. He's a vampire and he's Misery's dad, and he's a vampire, he's a dad. That's what's important. The significance of hair in this novel. Wolves. Of course we're talking about wolves. This is in the Omegaverse. And if this is a character or plot-driven story. But wait! Hold on. Are you joking me?
Warning. This review of Ali Hazelwood's Bride contains minor spoilers and overall descriptions of the plot, characters, and their relationships within the story. If you have not read the book yet, pause this video, save it to your Watch Later playlist, and come back when you've finished. Also, please take a moment to enjoy this wonderful art that I drew of myself. Thank you.
So, without further ado, let's jump into our discussion on Bride. You're probably wondering right off the bat, Sonia, what made you pick up this book in Kohl's, in the store? Why did you pick Bride? You've never read anything about Alpha Wolves or the Omegaverse. You've not even read Twilight. Well, I'll tell you why I picked this book up, because I went into the store and I saw it. I went into the store, I saw that it had the 25% off sticker, and I said, "Ooh, you're coming home with me." Ooh. So I went with what Book Talk was vibing about. Everybody was loving this book, and I was like, you know what? Let me stick it into my little cart. And quite frankly, I had been in the biggest reading slump. The biggest, juiciest, fattest, thickest reading slump of a lifetime. I could pick up a book, I'd get on the first page, I said, no, I'm not doing this. Put the book down. Put the book down. I couldn't do it. So when I walked into that Kohl's, I said, I'm going to pick up a book and I'm going to read it. And that's what I did. I got this 2 days ago. And if you know me, you know I'm notoriously slow at reading, but I finished this bad boy in 2 days. This book got me out of my reading slump. Amen, brother. Yes, I did pick up Bride by Ali Hazelwood on a whim because it had a 25% off sticker and I was in a reading slump and the cover is very nice. Before I get into a full-blown discussion about Bride by Ali Hazelwood, I just wanted to give a refresh of your memory. Let's give it a jump start and remind you what Bride is all about. Pause if you want to give this summary a full read, but in a nutshell, Bride is about a dangerous alliance between a vampire bride and an alpha werewolf becoming a love deep enough to sink your teeth into. It is a paranormal romance that has some fantastical elements, but is set in the modern world. So that's Bride in a nutshell, but I don't want the nutshell. I want to do a deep dive into my initial thoughts when reading this book, and let's start off with protagonist. Misery Lark. How this main character elevated the overall story through her realistic and humorous interactions with the supporting cast. I found it I find that in more of our modern romance, or even pushing into that romantasy category, we get a lot of characters, protagonists especially, female protagonists especially, that don't feel very real. And what I mean by that is the ways in which these protagonists or main characters interact with other characters just isn't something a real person would do. No. Have you ever been reading a book and find yourself following a character that is either being talked down to, maybe being bullied, having the dirt kicked at them, and their reaction is, I close my eyes, sit in silence, tuck my hair behind my ear, and trek forward, because I won't let their actions bother me. What was that? When I read, I get angry with the character. And when I'm seeing the main character or any character being beat on, being hurt, being pushed down, and their reaction is to not do anything about it, to me, that's not a real response. If you got spat on, why are you just wiping it off and carrying on with life? Girl, swing! Oh my gosh! I feel like Misery Lark, the protagonist of this novel, does an excellent job being a real person. The first excellent example of this occurs right at the end of chapter 4 and beginning of chapter 5. Misery Lark is brought into the Were territory as she is now married to Lo.
The following pronunciation is brought to you by pronouncenames.com. Lo.
Low.
And upon entering already, people are scowling at her. People are growling at her. People are frustrated that she's in their space. Understandably, we got some species battling going on here and she's just waltzed in. There is a line that gets crossed when a young were or a werewolf named Max sees Misery in the hallway of Lo's house, and he approaches her. Initially, it seems like they're going to have a nice conversation, but then he brings up the fact that he's got some family that, like, her family killed, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. That was like 100 years ago. And he's like, I don't care. And then he lunges at her. And of course, Misery's response is to defend herself. So she shows her fangs. When I think of werewolves and vampires, I think that both species would have fangs to an extent. Vampires got them long ones in the front. Werewolves, they got the pointy canines. But apparently that's not true in the story, because when Misery shows her fangs, the whole house is suddenly full of wares, and they're all going, whoa, she's got her fangs out. What is going on? And the fight is stopped right away because Lo shows up and he goes, I ain't having your fangs out in my household, ma'am. That is not happening on my land. Thank you very much. So Misery has her fangs out. Max is pressed up against the wall. One of the wares, called Juno, she's already pointing fingers, yelling, whoa, 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 whoa. Freak, what are you doing hurting Max? And you know what happens with all of these wares huddling around ready to break up the fight? Lo intervenes, grabs Misery, chucks her into his office, closes the door behind, and questions her. Dude, why the frick were you just about to kill Max there? On page 77, we can read, I tried to dip out of Lo's cage to leave. He lowers one arm, locking me in more tightly. What happened? He asks me. Juno beats me to the answer. She was about to drink him dry. We all saw it. She runs a hand over Max's clammy forehead. He looks briefly adrift and then stammers out, She was on me before I could do anything about it, and he bends his head as if lost for words. Every pair of eyes in the room turns to me. Oh, come on, I snort. Her fangs were so close, he whispers feebly. Max, brother, you launched yourself at her. This is the point in the story where clearly there's a wrong done to Misery here. She is being accused, being pointed at, and she was just defending herself. So I'm already fired up. I am ready to swan dive into this novel and fight all of the wares in Lowe's house. I'm like, guys, if Lowe has an office, does he not have security cameras? I would literally be standing there saying, roll them back. Roll them back, brother. Roll them back. Because I did nothing wrong. I was defending myself. And this is also the point in the story where I was expecting Misery to do the, I sit quietly and I accept the blame because now that I'm in were territory, there's nothing I can do but be guilty. And that is not what we get. Instead, we get a juicy, fat, delicious, scrum-diddly-umptious line from Misery. Yeah, okay, I roll my eyes. Please leave me out of your aromanical delusions. She said, not today. That's not happening today. You freaks. And after this, we get so many more interactions from Misery and the side characters that really show how humorous she is, how realistic she's written. She's not willing to hold back. She is not tucking her hair behind her ear at any point in time. Next, let's talk about our antagonist.
An absent antagonist. The lack of Misery's father's presence in the novel, up until the final few chapters, highlights the fact that the main antagonist of the story wasn't him at all, but Misery herself.
Vamp Daddy is our antagonist. Except he's not. He's more of an absentee father figure who just shows up at the end of the book to stir the pot. He's just here for the drama. That's it. He's at the beginning, first 2 chapters, he dips. And then he shows up for chapter 29 and is like, hey, Misery, remember me? Yeah. Vamp Daddy? I'm about to cause some problems. I know that on a technical level, yes, he will always be the antagonist of this story, as he is literally preventing Misery from attaining her goal. Her goal is to fit into society and find Serena, and Vamp Daddy is literally the blockade for that, making him the antagonist. But personally, I feel that a stronger antagonist in this story was Misery herself. She is constantly telling herself she cannot fit into the human society, the vampire society, or the were society, and she is preventing herself from being the greatest version of her by saying, well, they don't want me here or here or here. And she goes through the story becoming more and more understanding of the fact that she does fit into these places. She just has to find the right people. And I think that makes her her own antagonist. So now that we have the talk about the antagonist out of the way, because honestly, Vamp Daddy, you were so cool until you weren't, and then you really weren't cool at all. But Misery plays an excellent role of both protagonist and antagonist against herself. So now let's talk about wolves.
Werewolves, or where are the wolves? Interestingly, many modern interpretations of werewolves depict them as people who can shift into actual wolves, and not the massive, half-human, half-animal bipedal beasts that often appear in alpha wolf fan art. What does this do for the story?
Yes, I have seen the movie in parts. No, I have not read the books. And why is this significant? Because I have seen the werewolves in the Twilight movie and what they look like. And I feel that it's quite similar to what we have here in Bride. Now, what I find most interesting is that in a lot of modern interpretation of what a werewolf is, it's a human being who maybe is a bit hairier than usual, who can shift from their human state into a wolf form, but not like a high fantasy-esque werewolf with standing on the hind legs with the huge arms and like the buff chest and like can probably speak English at you. No, like a wolf that you would see in the wild. Like a wolf. A wolf. You know? But what I was expecting from this novel was to see, I say what I was expecting as I look at the cover and you can see Lo's wolf form in the background. But what I was expecting was a huge, like monstrous creature that stands on his hind legs and has these massive claws, and he can like shred things apart, and he's like dark furred and like chest hair, whatever, and he's got a tail, and I was expecting like that kind of werewolf where he can be a human but he can also be this kind of monster as well. But what we ended up getting was Lo looking more like a wolf, like a wolf you would see in the wild. And honestly, what that did for me was, when I was reading the book, all I could imagine was, instead of a wolf, were those really fluffy white dogs that are often called Biff. And they look like giant snowballs. And that's all I pictured him. Because as soon as I heard that his fur was white and not like dark like his hair, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy's just like a fluffy dog. And what's even more interesting to me is that while we see a lot of Misery's vampiric side, like with her, she needs to drink blood, she can't go out into the sun or she'll be burned. She sleeps in the closet. It's a little bit weird, but she does it anyway. We don't get much of Lo or the other Were's wolfy side. We see at the very end of the novel how Lo and Serena transform into their Were forms and absolutely shred apart the vampire council. But still, all I can imagine are those fluffy white dogs, because Serena is white too. And I'm not quite sure what the significance of that is, but I just found it really interesting that instead of seeing these huge, like, burly beasts that are going to rip you apart, that are almost like nightmare fuel, we got these, like, actual wolves. That was just something that struck my interest. Next, I wanted to talk about hair, because there are so many times in this gosh darn book that hair is mentioned, and I feel that it is going to have a great significance to the plot, but there is none.
The significance of hair, or at least how I thought hair would be important to the overall plot, because in the end, it wasn't.
Let's first discuss Misery. Misery often, you can even see it in the cover, Misery often uses her hair to cover up her identity, her vampiricness, because of her pointed ears, at which right off the bat at the beginning of the story, we very quickly learn that pointed ears and pointed fangs and any pointed things are not welcome in the Were territory, so she uses her hair as a way to sort of mask her vampiric identity. And now what I thought the story would be leading to was maybe at the end she has this super huge realization that I don't care if my ears are pointed. I'm hanging out with the people I love, and they don't care if my ears are pointed either. And I for real thought she was going to chop off her hair, Tangled style, and was going to rock a short haircut, a bob, if you will, and have her ears out at all times. But that did not happen. Still though, without the big chop, her hair plays a really significant role in showing versus not showing her identity. Even though we know she's a vampire and all the Weres that live with her know she's a vampire, having her hair pulled over her ears still closes off a part of who she really is. And as the story progresses, we do see her start to get more comfortable with her ears hanging out. Her ears are hanging out. Another character whose hair I thought was extremely significant but was not, spoiler alert, was Owen's, Misery's sister. Side note, how did we come to those names? I understand Misery in the sense that she caused her mother a lot of pain during birth, but how did we get Owen? That was not a point of the plot we explored, and I wish it was. Now, Owen, like right off the bat in the story, Misery talks about Owen's hair and specifically his hairline and how it's already receding. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a perfect juxtaposition between Misery and Owen. Misery, who uses her hair constantly to hide her identity, to cover her ears, and Owen, with his receding hairline, who is soon going to be bald, and he's only 25 because they're twinsies, is losing his hair, and he has nothing to hide his identity. And I was waiting for the moment in which we would discuss this and how he is so heavily into the vampiric lifestyle that he's losing his hair. He cannot hide his vampire pointy ears. He cannot throw an emo bayang across the eye. He can't. But Misery can. And does that have anything to do with the fact that she grew up in the human world for most of her life and is now in were territory? Or did Owen just get the bad genes? We didn't really explore that plot point a lot, but we can, as readers, we can always infer. But on a completely separate tangent, most importantly, and I thought 100%, I could have bet you like $10 on this. $10 is a lot. That a discussion would happen on Lo's hair. Oh my gosh. This was out of all the plot twists in this book, this was by far the biggest plot twist of them all. I was picturing Lo to look like this, and this, and this, and this. I was not imagining him to have a buzz cut. A buzz cut? He's a werewolf. Aren't they supposed to be hairy? And nothing against people with buzz cuts. It was just absolutely baffling to me. And I thought his hair would be the most significant out of all the hair that we see in the story. And that's a lot of hair. Sort of getting to the midway point of the story, we are hearing a lot now about Lo's dad, who used to be the old alpha, the Rock. I know his name starts with R and is like Rococo. It's something. He was irrelevant in my mind for most of the story, but he was the old alpha. In a nutshell, he was terrible at his job, or at least in the latter half of his alpha wolfness, he just wasn't keeping the pack up to the standard he needed to. And I thought that at this point in the story, at the halfway point when we are hearing the most about Lo's dad, I 100% thought that a discussion on Lo's hair would be brought up because, as we all know, hair holds memories. And a buzz cut is an excellent way of removing or revoking those memories that you had in the past. And I 100% thought that Lo was going to do a little chit chat with Misery because at one point she was fully like getting her fingers all up in his buzz cut. She was talking about playing with his hair. Girl, he's got no hair to play with. He's got a buzz. Meow. He's got nothing. Anyway, I for real thought Lo would bring up the fact that he cut off his hair intentionally because the memories he had when he had longer hair was when he was with his dad, and his dad was the alpha of the pack, and he simply did not want to keep that. But guess what? He just has a buzz cut because he wants to. Woo! Oh my gosh. I think for me that was the biggest plot twist because we didn't even talk about his hair. We brought it up 2 times, his buzz cut. Wedding day, she turns, walks down the aisle, and we see he's got a buzz cut. And then when she's playing with his hair that he doesn't have, I rake my fingers through his delicious buzz cut. You what? But anyway, that was all that I thought was going to be in the novel on hair, but actually wasn't. I guess it's just a bunch of things we can infer, because even though it wasn't talked about, we can all still vibe with the idea that Lo probably shaved his head to remove the memories he had with his dad. Misery does use her hair to cover her ears and hide a part of her identity, and Owen is balding. Finally, let's talk about character or plot. Character or plot. From reading this novel, would you argue that it was more character-driven or plot-driven? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. For me, this was a 100% character-driven story. I felt like if we didn't have the character interactions we did, the plot would not be rolling. I was more focused on the interactions that the main characters were having with each other and with the supporting cast. And honestly, if there was no plot in this story and it was just the characters yapping at each other, I would still read it. Overall, I would 100% recommend this to you if you are in a reading slump and need to get your way out of it. It was a fairly easy read. The plot was very straightforward. There wasn't any super confusing points that you had to like reread and go back and wrap your mind around. It was all fun and games. It was all fun and games. And I would highly recommend it to those who are Alpha Omega verse enjoyers or who want to dip their toes into a little bit of Alpha Wolf action. I would also recommend it to those of you who are romantasy and romance enjoyers who are in a reading slump. It is not, it doesn't really play into the fantastical elements as it is set in modern time, but you do get a hint of that with the vampiric and werewolfic elements. Thank you so much for sticking around with me while I ramble about Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and I cannot wait to do another one of these reading review videos for you. Thank you so much for sticking around. I'm Sonia and I write, and ciao for now, fiction fiends.